Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. I'm not going to lie. One of my favorite things is when I see my guest speakers jam into my intro song.
I know. It's got like a good energy. I'm like, okay, this is good.
I love it. For those of you that are jumping on live now, we appreciate you being here and supporting Nichole, her journey, and the Her Version platform. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. So today I am hanging out with Miss Nichole Howard. Nichole is everything you would want in a professional photographer. She is creative and passionate about her work, but this picture perfect life was not always so picture perfect. Divorced parents, experimentation with drugs early in life led to a really low GPA in her first attempt at college, along with a whirlwind of other things that life has thrown at her. Nichole has proven to have resilience and drive, graduating school with her master's degree and becoming a sensation in the world of photography. She is now helping women find their voice through pictures, empowering branding and showcasing storytelling through the camera lens. We are excited to know more. Welcome, Nichole.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to be connecting with all the amazing women that are part of your community. Honestly, it's so beautiful what you've built.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. We're on the way up, as they say, and we're continuing to grow, continuing to expand, and continuing to involve women like yourself who've gone through some shit, gone through a little bit of stuff, and you didn't let it bring you down. You didn't let it, dig a little hole in the ground.
Stop you. Yeah, I love that.
Yes,
it's so
you're out.
important.
You're doing inspiring work within the community, and I love women like you who are open to sharing a little bit about some of the stuff they've gone through in order to help inspire other people who are possibly going through some stuff themselves and are feeling like shit. Just feeling like shit.
Exactly. I mean, everybody goes through stuff. That's the thing I've learned. It's funny. I feel like everybody has a story. Everybody has some kind of hardship that they've gone through. If you've gotten through this life unscathed, I want to meet you and get maybe take up some of that luck. I don't know what that is, but
yes.
I feel like, and sometimes you just have to remember you're not alone. So I love that, that's my goal is just anybody who experienced anything that I've experienced, or just like you've shared the other stories from other women who experience what they've gone through. I think it's just so important to just remind others, hey, you're not alone. We're all living it and just trying to do our best every day.
100%. 100%. And I like that you're saying that as far as we all go through stuff, and it would be weird if you didn't. And I think, the reason this channel is doing so well and growing so rapidly is because there's this kind of unspoken genre actually in the industry you're in of pictures. And a lot of times we're viewing the world through this social media thing, and we're thinking that our neighbors or our, the society that we're in and around, our little circle, isn't having their own stuff that they're dealing with because they're seeing one or two pictures going up. And one of the things that I like to reiterate is, social media, 100%. But if you go through anybody's photo album that is not on social media, they're all pictures of happiness. That's what it is. My parents didn't pull out the camera when we were having a bad day. They pulled out the camera for awesome events. We're all smiling. We're all happy. So all this is just people's photo albums online the same way my mom has a photo album of us in her closet somewhere.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
it's really important to, have these real conversations sometime and say, yes, of course, we're taking happy, awesome pictures. That's what
Oh,
we've
yeah.
been doing forever. And
Absolutely.
we're still going through stuff.
Right. It's all, life is a mix of all the emotions, right? You don't just get happy ones. You don't just get joyful ones. You get hard ones. You get sadness. You get anger. We're built. I mean, one of the things actually I've learned recently, and one of the things that I've continued to do to help me get over some of the struggles is personal development. And what I've learned is like just accepting that we're humans and we have this wide range of emotions is like half the battle, right? Like you just don't always have to be happy all the time, right? There's a whole other range for you and we're born with it and that's okay. Like I think some of that too is accepting it so you can get back into a place where you feel better because like sometimes I spend so much time resisting like I don't want to be angry because like what does that mean about me if I'm angry? What does it mean about me if I'm sad? It means absolutely nothing. It means that you're human.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited for this conversation. Very cool. All right. Well, we're going to dive into all of that. So awesome. I love that we're on the same page. I do want to start out before we actually dive into some of that stuff. Is kind of just give us a rundown of childhood, teenage, coming, some of your journey that you've been on up until today. And then we'll run through some questions and pull some nuggets of inspiration from you and kind of go from there. Is that cool?
Yeah, I love it.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so all right, the story, right? This is so, and please do stop me because I started to write my story down just because I was like, all right, like where do I want to start? Like, I mean, you don't realize, like, right, all the things that have influenced you in your lifetime to get to where you are. But I think for me, one of the most memorable things that happened really young. When I was around 5 years old, my parents divorced. And I didn't realize like that changed the trajectory of my entire life. So just all of the events that followed after that, like interestingly enough, that same year that my parents divorced, my grandfather died. And I was really close to him, apparently. Again, like I was 5. So, like, how much do you really remember? But, like, those vivid, impressionable years, right? All of these really tumultuous things are happening. Now, granted, like, I say that with a grain of salt because I realized I grew up with a lot of privilege. I obviously lived in a very safe neighborhood, and I'm very grateful for that. So there were other influences there, but like there were some really big things happening really young in life that really kind of had an effect on me as I got older. So basically, and they also moved me out of school. So like at 5 years old, I changed schools, grandfather died, and my parents got divorced. So I was like, what is happening in the world right now? Super confused, felt really unstable. And then just kind of as I was growing up, like my dad, he kind of wasn't around as much. My mom really raised my sister and I. And again, I think it's important to kind of give credit where credit's due, right? Like my parents were both 25 when they had my sister and I. Like I can't imagine being 25 with 2 kids. So, and they had their own stuff they were going through. But I mean, I definitely think they didn't really have like a good relationship until I was in my 20s. Like they weren't really in the same room together. Like other than my dad picking us up every other weekend for his scheduled visitation, they weren't in the same room together until it was my graduation.
Wow.
That's like something to say right there, right? Like they just they could not be together. And even at one point, my dad lived across the street from us, but only saw him, my sister and I only saw him on our visitation weekends across the street, like right there.
Wow.
So, and then thinking about that now, I'm like, that's so strange. But at the time, like I didn't question it because I was a kid and I didn't really understand. And, both of my parents worked really hard. My mom was a single mom, so she was always like working really hard. My dad, I think he dipped into his work a lot. He got remarried to a lovely woman. But again, and she's been amazing as well. But it was just the dynamic. It was very, very much like we see you when we're scheduled to see you, and if we don't see you, then we don't see you. And I think it had like a weird effect on my psyche and my worth and my value and what I came to accept from other people as well. And I think it definitely like led into some of the things I got into as I was older, because I wasn't really, the thing is too, like they didn't really have time for us to go into sports, right? So I wasn't involved in any sports. I, the time, effort, money required was just like, nope, sorry. So like I had all this time in my hands as a kid, and I just like felt a little amiss, and felt like, nobody really had like the energy for me. So I kind of like had this weird dissonance of like wanting to belong really desperately, and then also wanting to escape.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's where like the drugs experimentation came in, and sex, drugs, alcohol kind of came into play, because I think it gave me a place, right? I felt like I could fit in there and I could do that, and like it didn't have to be good at that, right? Because the other thing too is my grades were always up and down, so I was always somebody who had to try. Like I was always somebody who, if I didn't put in like the extra hour studying, I didn't do well on the test.
Yeah.
So I went through many years where like I had to be tutored in math, I had to be tutored in reading. And I hate to say it, I felt stupid. Like I felt like I was not smart. And I didn't have to be smart to do drugs. In fact, I could just be an idiot. So,
And be really good at it.
and be really good at it and have a really good time.
Yeah.
And so I know it sounds awful, like looking back, but it was like this escape route, and also made me feel really connected. And I think, I didn't realize how detrimental that was. And, the decisions I was making, how dangerous they were, because I honestly didn't care. Like I just didn't care. I had no desire. So I think, it wasn't until I was 19, and I got in a really bad car accident, totaled my car in the middle of the night. And like, if people know the area, it was like in backwoods Pennsylvania. And I was like, it was like a wake up call for me, and I was like, what am I doing? Like it felt like I lost my freedom, I lost my car, like like when I woke up the next day, I was like, what did I do? Like, oh my gosh. So it was a really big wake up call for me, and I started to shift a lot in my life. So I know there's like questions that you have, so I don't know how much deeper I want to go into that, the shift, but that's what kind of got me there. It was like this really kind of, like again, well, I had always had a roof over my head. I lived in a safe neighborhood. I actually lived in a pretty affluent, upper, like I'm gonna say upper class, but like middle class, like well-to-do middle class community. And I obviously had white privilege and those things associated with that. I I definitely struggled. I mean, I grew up in an apartment in the middle of actually a lot of really beautiful houses, which is really weird. So I think for me, it was just, yeah, I never felt like I belonged or fit in. And I think my parents were always just kind of really young, not really ready to have kids or had kids, and didn't really know what to do with us. And so it kind of led to me feeling like I had to find my own place to belong. And I made some poor decisions because I didn't really know what I was doing.
Yeah. How
So,
how did you wind up realizing this creative side that you have?
so it was interesting. My grandmother, who's always a positive influence in our life, that is somebody who's stable. So I actually think about, there were a couple influences who were always really lovely, like really lovely for my sister and I. She encouraged us. So she was always like, you should explore, drawing. And she always had like all these things prepared for us if we would go to her house, like markers and paints and all this stuff. And she was amazing. Like she played organ, like the piano organ. She played golf. She played bridge. She had this really beautiful life, and she encouraged us to be curious about the different things that really interested us. And
Mhm.
so even though my sister and I like weren't involved in like sports or anything like that, we did have this creative side, but that wasn't really as embraced as much in other areas of my life other than that safe space.
Wow. And
Yeah.
how did that turn into photography?
So actually, when I was 30, I got my first camera, and it was actually a gift from my ex-husband. But it was a life changer for me, because I always knew I wanted to invest in a camera, or I want to say DSLR, but for those who don't know what that is, it's just like a fancy camera. It was something I really wanted. I kind of always saw things in pictures, if that makes sense. Like I was always the person taking pictures at the parties, or I was taking pictures, just walking on the street on my iPhone. So for me, getting like a real nice camera was always a goal, but I never took the money I invested in myself because I worked in nonprofits. I mean, that was a whole other part of my story going through college and then finding a career that actually paid well was really challenging for me. I felt like I needed to fit in a certain 9 to 5 box. Um, but getting that camera changed my life. Like I feel like it was opened a door to a whole world I had no idea that I loved as much as I do, and that
Wow.
I'm actually pretty good at.
Wow, that is so cool. Did you jump in right away as far as I'm a photographer or
So I started out just walking around and taking like street photography in Philadelphia. So I spent about 12 years living in Philly. So after I basically kind of went through that kind of weird upbringing where kind of felt amiss, was experimenting with things that were, not the best, got in the car accident. I actually changed schools, started applying myself in school, actually trying. And I moved into Philly and went to Temple. And so I stayed there for like about 12 years. And so walking around Philly with my camera, I saw all this inspiration and these things I wanted to capture. And at the time, Instagram was actually a photo sharing app, very different than what it is today. And I would share my pictures on Instagram. And I got a lot of interest. People were like, this is beautiful. I really love this. And I was surprised. I was really shocked because I wasn't expecting that. And so I kept doing more of it. I was like, this is great. It's something I love. And it seems to be giving back to the community in a positive way because people are enjoying it.
yeah.
So I'm going to continue to do it. And then I was featured in a local magazine. And then I had a couple local businesses reach out to me and say, hey, I love the work you took. Like I took a couple pictures down in Stone Harbor of like a Christmas setup for a hotel down there and just like posted it. And they were like, hey, we would love to use this photo in our advertisements for like the holiday season. And I was like, sure, that's amazing. Of course. So it was kind of like this light bulb moment of like, oh my God, I can actually do something I love as a career. Right. But that started, God, so that was about 7 years ago. So, we've worked over 7 years getting to the point where I'm at now where I am a full-time photographer. But yeah, it was really interesting the evolution of how it happened. And then starting to get into portraiture work and exploring what that looked like. And then really getting to a point where it wasn't just a side hustle anymore. And it was a part-time job and then it was a full-time job. So it's kind of just slowly evolved over time. That was a long-winded answer to your question.
What were you doing between 20 and 30? What did you wind up getting into?
Whew. So that was around the time when I started therapy. So I got in the car accident at 19, 20, right around then. And I basically enrolled into a new school, went to community college. I said, you know what, I'm just gonna figure out what it is I want to do or what I even like, right? Like I just kind of like reset because I was enrolled in Penn State and I was, really not paying attention to my grades at the time. And, that's where that first attempt at college, like I didn't do well. I really didn't because I didn't try at all. And I really didn't believe in myself. So getting in the car accident, starting therapy, enrolling in a new school, those were big monumental changes. And then I essentially ended up getting a 4.0 at the community college. So it's like I went from being like failing to like 4.0, got into Temple, and then got my undergrad in psychology. Went to work for Planned Parenthood for 4 years because I really believed in women's access to healthcare. It's really important, and it's something that isn't focused on a lot. And then still working actually multiple jobs at the time because it is a nonprofit. And while it was a full-time job as a counselor, it only paid like $12.67 an hour. So I was like still serving in the city and working restaurant jobs to just kind of stay afloat. At 25, moved back in with my mom. She was remarried at the time, still is. Steve is amazing. Just again, regrouped. I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? Decided to go back and get my master's degree And I also got a job at the hospital University of Penn at the time as an executive assistant. And that helped me get my master's because they helped me pay the way to get my master's. And then also gave me a lot of confidence working in that role and exploring some different things in that position. Things like from everything from fundraising to project management and process mapping and all kinds of things that I really didn't even realize I was capable of. And then that got me to so basically I graduated with my master's by 30. Got married at 30 because I also met my ex-husband at that, like around 28. And yeah, I felt like my life was on a certain path, right? Like I was like, okay, like I'm married. I, did the things. I 2 years later, I bought a house. We bought a house together, got married. I had my master's degree, and I felt like, okay, everything's coming together. It's all like happening. And then I hit another road bump where, we got divorced. Because I realize now, like, we weren't the right fit for each other, but that's okay. And I kind of had to rebuild again. So it's like this constant, like, okay, like build it up, experiment, and then like rebuild a little bit and learn a little bit more about myself. And at each juncture, I've learned more and more and more about who I am and what I have to offer the world and what the world really has for me to experiment with and learn from. So
Yeah, definitely. What do you think is the biggest challenge
the
you've got?
biggest
Yeah.
challenge.
What do you think? What do you think is the biggest challenge? And then what did you learn from that challenge?
So for me, I would say the biggest challenge was going through divorce twice. um, yeah, I think as a kid and then again as an adult. And I think I learned from both of those experiences that it doesn't have to define me. Um, Even though there is shame associated with it and fear, anxiety, and some really negative emotions, some beautiful rebirth can come from it too. And it helped me learn that I can do a lot just on my own. Like I'm a very capable person,
Do you
even
think you
going through
got
hard
married?
things.
Do you think you got married just to get married?
No, I think I really felt like he was somebody who was at that time. I felt like he was the person for me. Like I really do. I really do. And I'm like, it is hard because nobody gets married to get divorced. I say that all the time. Like nobody's like, yeah, this is why I'm doing this, and you don't think you're checking a box. You don't think it. In fact, I personally was like, I'm not doing that. In fact, I waited until my 30s. I was like, I didn't even do it in my 20s. I thought I skipped that whole process. I was like, I did it right.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times, you grow as a person, and I'm pretty dedicated to self-development and growth. And sometimes you realize that you're on a path the other person isn't on, and it's just not going to work anymore. There were some things too in that relationship. He was, he had some insecurities. He had a lot of insecurities and a lot of jealousy and things that he needed to work through. And, he wasn't as dedicated, at least explicitly from what I saw, to his own personal development process. And
Do you,
so,
do you think that hinders a relationship when one
yeah,
person is really leveling up as a human and the other person's just kind of chill?
I think it's really hard. I think because there's interpretations, right? So I think that he may have thought in his life that he was doing the things he needed to do. And I felt like I was doing what I needed to do. I mean, for me, I really felt like I've always been really committed to personal development since 20, since having the experiences that I had and then how much it's helped me. I was like, that for me was transformational. So like there's not going to be a part of my life where it's not critical or it's not something that I continue to work on. So I think that I realized that like you can't change, you can't change a person. He's going to be who he was. And as challenging as that was, I mean, I just don't think, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think it's really hard to say because I think there's so many like philosophies out there for me. Like I didn't think I could change him, so that's kind of why it ended.
Yeah.
But and I didn't think he was on a journey to wanting to change himself. So
yeah, I think there just comes a point sometimes where you sort of grow out of people,
yeah,
not even just relationships, but just grow out of relationships,
1000%.
all kinds of relationships.
I have such admiration for people who are in long-term relationships for 25 years, 30 years, 50 years, who have gone through those ebbs and flows and yet managed to stay connected. Like, I feel like that is a definite, that is not easy. And I still don't know the secret. Like, and nobody, everybody's like, "Oh, it's your best friend." I'm like, but they're not always your best friend. Sometimes you're kind of pissed at them. Like, like, you know, I don't know if that's it.
Yeah, definitely. That's so funny.